And Marianne, it's just so wonderful to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. So it does look like Donald Trump has pulled this off. What are your initial reactions?
Well, obviously, I'm not happy about it, but I also feel that everything that went wrong is what I've been saying would go wrong for the last year and a half. I'm not happy about that, but I ran for president because I knew that the traditional Democratic playbook, as the corporate Democrats are in charge of that playbook now, would not be enough to defeat Trump this time. I've said repeatedly that this would be more like 2016 than like 2020. And it's very clear to me that the Democratic and Republican and media, party and media elite don't know how to read the room. Many of those people have not sauntered out of their gated communities long enough to have a sense of what is going on out there. And what they did was they suppressed a presidential primary. If over the last year and a half we had been having a robust conversation about the fact that 46% of Americans are regularly skipping meals in order to pay their rent, about the fact that 90% million people are underinsured or uninsured, that over half of our bankruptcies are medical bankruptcies, that 1 in 4 Americans live with medical debt, that 1.3 million Americans are rationing their insulin, that over 70% of Americans say that they are living with chronic economic anxiety. The Democratic Party decided it was Joe, in fact, it wasn't even that they decided an agenda. We weren't even supposed to discuss what an agenda might be. So from where I sit, this was very predictable. And the fact that there is this media political elite industrial complex in the Democratic Party, they should resign their positions tonight. If in fact it is called for Trump. It's leaning that way, but we're not at a final result yet. These people's position is only in their mind, but they felt in their smug arrogance such a sense of entitlement. They would choose Joe, then they would choose Kamala, and they would suppress any candidate or any conversation about the wider issues that could have provided the kind of compelling alternative, a compelling vision for the American people. People are feeling hopeless out in America. Now, in my opinion, Donald Trump offers false hope. He'll name a pain, but he will not name a policy that's going to fix it. But people will take false hope over no hope. And to me, if we lose tonight, that's what happened.
I mean, I have to say, you are vindicated in a big way because you wanted to run in this primary and you said, I have an alternative to Joe Biden, and you were absolutely suppressed. They would broker no opposition to him, despite the fact that the majority of the country at the time thought that he was too old. And then instead of having a primary when they decided he wasn't going to run, they simply elevated Kamala Harris, who was never a strong candidate, who couldn't pull it off in 2019. So you're saying, I know that you're unhappy about the result, but it's a huge vindication of what you have been saying, not just for 4 years, but for 8 years.
8 years, actually. I take no pleasure in having been right. There's something much bigger here than the fact that I was sort of emotionally, psychologically, and politically slapped around here. What I'm concerned about now is that if, in fact, Trump wins, we are going to have a force field from which to mount a loyal opposition to any transgression on his part or the part of his administration against democratic norms. This is what people are concerned about, Batya. The fact, it's not for us like, we went through 4 years of him, things didn't fall apart that much. It's different now, especially since the Supreme Court has given him this outrageous immunity. They have basically established that we have a king rather than a president. And so there is a sense of collective trauma among those of us on the left. And my concern now is that we not look to the DNC. We must not look to the people who took us to this place to spin some narrative about where we need to go from here. They are going to blame everybody and everything except themselves. And so it's important that we have a conversation about a compelling vision. Obviously, it was not allowed in this particular campaign, if in fact Trump wins. But we're going to have it now. And that's where my dedication lies. And I think that's what millions of people will want to feel, in the sense of, where do we go now? The last place to go to is the people who took us to this place. There needs to be a real reckoning. And the Democratic elite, and that includes at CNN, that includes at MSNBC, it includes the John Favreaus, it includes the ladies on The View, people willing to suppress, to lie, to character assassinate, to smear, even to infiltrate campaigns. We need to see that for what it is. And that group should listen. By the way, this is the same group that gave us Donald Trump in 2016.
Well, and he's on
enough is
track
enough.
to steal even more of the country that has been historically Democratic stalwarts. And I'm not just talking about Hispanic voters, Latino voters, black men. Apparently some exit polls out of Georgia have him at 25% of black men. But union households, union voters, apparently he's on track to get 50% of union voters. Now, this is a huge, huge victory for a Republican. What do you chalk that up to, and what is the lesson there for the Democrats?
Well, as I said before, people will take false hope over no hope whatsoever. The lesson for the Democrats is to become the Democratic Party again. You know, FDR said we would not have to worry about a fascist takeover as long as democracy delivered on its blessings, on its promises. And that's what the Democratic Party used to stand for. It used to stand for the unequivocal advocacy for the working people of the United States. That would mean universal health care, like in every other advanced nation. It would mean tuition-free college and tech school, like in every other advanced nation. It would mean standing for fair taxation. It would be recognizing and not like pussyfooting around the fact that we now have a society in which governmental and financial resources just flow to the top 1% at the expense of everyone else. The Democratic, even in this particular campaign, there was like trying to make it to the right so the right will like us. You know, it's interesting, but I feel sometimes like the Democratic Party today, it's almost like they are maybe subconsciously, I don't know, intending to shrink their base. The real progressive issues that the Democratic Party has traditionally stood for were thrown overboard in this race. And sometimes all that Donald Trump does is he just, hey, you left that diamond on the beach, I'll take it. You're not going to talk about how to create peace in the world? Fine, I'll take it. I'll pretend I'm a peacenik. I mean, he's a very shrewd salesman. And so the Democratic Party will have to become the Democratic Party again. But I don't think it will become, I think it will be a permanent, it will be in terrible shape for years and years and years to come, as long as the people, that elite crowd that I mentioned, feel that they have the right, that they are entitled to suppress the candidates that they don't want, to de-amplify who they don't want, to shame who they don't want, to make a joke of who they don't want. You know, what they did in this campaign was the narratives were so absurd, such as, we don't primary an incumbent president. Well, I'm old enough to remember Eugene McCarthy. I'm old enough to remember Senator Robert Kennedy Sr., who primaried Lyndon Johnson. Now, there's a very important issue here. They were standing for opposition to the Vietnam War, and their primarying Lyndon Johnson actually pushed Johnson out because of the Vietnam War. Here, they didn't want any conversation coming in that wasn't convenient to their purposes. The second one was anybody running against Biden in the primary was a spoiler, which anyone who has been in 7th grade civics class knows is not true. You can't be a spoiler in a primary. So we have to ask ourselves, what happened to the critical thinking on the part of the average Democratic voter? When did we become the party that just, okay, whatever the DNC says? What has happened with the Democratic Party is the nightmare that George Washington and John Adams were afraid of. The role of the party is supposed to be to stand in the back, let the voters decide, and then the party steps in. But if your main media partners suppress, blacklist, de-amplify anybody but their chosen candidate, if they are willing to lie and smear about anyone else to make sure that nobody even wants to hear them, even if they know they exist, then where we go is where we got to. They've done this twice. They did it in 2016 by suppressing Bernie Sanders. I don't know who would have won the
General election.
yeah, I don't. Well, I don't know who would have won the primary if they had taken their fingers off the scale. But I do think Trump would never have been president either way because the Democrats would have shown up in greater happiness. So this is a real inflection point for the Democratic Party, and if the Democratic Party will not take it forward as a real party standing once again unequivocally, unabashedly for the working people of the United States, and clearly the Republicans don't, but at least they're smart enough to say they do, then something else will emerge. Some phoenix will emerge and rise from this. I don't know what it will look like, but it's got to happen or this country will be in very, very bad shape for years to come.
Marianne, thank you so much for joining us. This was such an important conversation for us to have.